Good evening. I am Patty Sternberg, President of the Society for Contemporary Art. It is with great pleasure that I extend a warm welcome to you for our first public program of the 2023-24 season. Tonight, we are privileged to present artist Anne Appleby in conversation with local artist Caroline Kent. The program is being generously sponsored by Prada. Before we delve into tonight's program, I'd like to share some exciting SCA news and upcoming events. We welcomed E. Cow as the director of the SCA in early July. E. comes to us from the Art Institute of Chicago, where she previously served as director of curatorial administration in the Department of Art of Asia. We look forward to you all meeting her as we kick off this new season. Please mark your calendars for October 25th. We will collaborate with the Museum of Contemporary Photography at Columbia College for a public lecture featuring New York City and Memphis-based artist Tommy Ka. This lecture will take place at the Ferguson Hall at the Museum of Contemporary Photography and be followed there by a complimentary reception. Thanks to the support of our members, our first two member events of the season, a gallery walk in the Westtown Gallery District and a visit to the private collection of Trissa Bobrowski and Sandeep Malangi, have both been sold out. Our members are invited to a private tour of the 5th edition of the Chicago Architecture Biennial. This is a rehearsal on November 14th. It will be led by the biennial co-director, Fahim Majid, at the Chicago Cultural Center. Keep an eye out for the invitation. For those of you that are not already SCA members, I hope you will consider joining our group and furthering contemporary art at the Art Institute of Chicago. We offer 5 tiers of membership, including junior and artist memberships. We offer reduced memberships available by application. To find out more, please visit our website. The SCA is continually seeking both individual and corporate partners. We encourage you to reach out if you're interested in learning more about sponsoring an upcoming members event or public program. With the business done, I'd like to invite our SCA programming chair, Jessica Diamond, to introduce our special guests. Thank you to all of you for joining us for this evening's program.
Thank you, Patty, and thank you to everyone for being here tonight for the first SCA lecture of our fall season. It is my great pleasure to present a conversation between 2 remarkable contemporary artists this evening. And we welcome our special guest speaker, Anne Appleby, who is visiting us from Missoula, Montana, and will be engaging in a dialogue with the equally exceptional artist and educator, Caroline Kent. With a career spanning decades, Anne Appleby's work evokes a sense of profound connection with the natural world, translating her observations into the color cycle of seasonal evolution. Anne's painting and sculpture explores themes of identity, memory, and the ever-evolving relationship between humanity and our environment. Anne earned a BFA at the University of Montana in 1977 and took a 10-year apprenticeship with the Ojibwa artist and elder Ed Barbo, connecting her to her Anishinaabe heritage. Anne's work is in the permanent collection of numerous museums worldwide, including the painting titled Mountain, acquired by the Art Institute in 2020. Joining Anne in the conversation is Caroline Kent, a local Chicago-based artist celebrated for her innovative approach to abstraction, inviting viewers to question the boundaries of perception and understanding through her unique use of color, shape, and form, exploring the intersection of culture, language, and personal experience. We eagerly anticipate the insights and revelations that will emerge from this program, and so without further ado, let us warmly welcome Anne Appleby and Caroline Kent.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out this evening. It is a total pleasure of mine to be in conversation with Anne, painter to painter, this evening. I was telling Anne earlier that if I wasn't up here, I would definitely be attending because I'm really curious about her practice. Thanks to this programming, I've been able to get to know Anne a little better, and I'm hoping that the conversation this evening is not only rich and insightful, but gives you kind of a peek into the practice and Anne's livelihood based in Montana, and gives you, just a really rich view. And I encourage everyone to kind of not be shy and have questions at the end, and be thinking about questions as we kind of go through this conversation. So, without further ado.
Thank you very much for coming this evening, and let me tell you, it's quite an honor to be able to spend this hour with you. So I hope you have some questions at the end.
Well, we'll get started. We're going to jump right in and look at a couple works to begin with that are called First Light and Last Light. And this slide and this slide are the two paintings. And I kind of earlier was going back and forth between them two, and you can kind of see this kind of shift in the palette and in the light and what you can see and what you can't in both of them. And so I thought this might be a nice starting place to kind of talk about a little bit about your process, Anne, and the way that you approach these works.
This is part of an exhibition that started at the Missoula Art Museum. It's called Hymn for the Mother. And later it was shown at Parrish Heining Gallery in Los Angeles. So these First Light, Last Light paintings were kind of the springboard for the concept for the exhibition because it is fairly conceptual. And the reason it's conceptual is Hymn for the Mother, Mother Earth. And to me, it really, I was trying my best to address our changing planet in regards to climate. So in the Cree indigenous tradition, first light and last light, if a person were to be facing a sudden death, first light and last light is they go to this place where there's no light, so therefore there's no color. And to me, it kind of puts us in the place that we are right now. And also, as a painter, I'm really interested in that idea because there's 2 times a day. There's the morning time, the dawn, where there's darkness, and then we get light, and we can see color again. And then in the evening at dusk, the same thing happens again, it reverses. So I, as a painter, in the last many decades that I've been painting, I really, really am about those kind of cusp moments in nature and also in the moment itself, because no moment is ever the same as the one that preceded it or follows it ever again in our lives. So I'm really interested in that kind of space, and I guess you could call it awareness of being alive.
The orientation of this, as I'm looking at it on the screen down here, but it's like looking up at the sky and seeing the clouds and the diffusion and on the corners, getting this peak of sunlight through. Can you talk a little bit about your process to building up to that kind of color on the surface?
Yeah, these all have specific names. I didn't write down there's 10 of these, by the way. There's 5 dawns and 5 dusks. And one of them would be like the one in, I think it's April. It's called When the Robins Return. And so it would have all the kind of buildup of the color of spring, and then it would start getting grayed out to what it would be like at dusk to lose that color.
That's incredible. You were saying earlier when we were talking that some of these paintings have about 30 layers.
Most of them do.
Which is just incredible. I work very differently, and so to think about, and also the fact that it's oil paint and that, it stays malleable a long time so that you can continuously kind of return to it and touch that surface over and over. It makes me think about the temporal aspects of the moment. You're always in this moment of moving that surface and then connecting that to the moment of seeing these. scenes that might be out your studio, since your studio is kind of situated,
In the woods.
in the woods, which I think is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, where I live, I'm very in touch with the natural world. I have no artificial light, and pretty much the only human-made noise that I hear are airplanes that pass over. I can almost tell the time of day when they pass over. Oh, well, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're going to Salt Lake City. So I'm really, really immersed in the natural world.
And thinking about immersion, the subject of your work is often the land. And, you started off by, saying that work was about climate and thinking about the land. This painting that we're looking at here is quite large scale. And in thinking about, the legacy of landscape painting in this country and even abroad in Europe, and thinking of the romantic qualities that exist when one is looking at painting and what is supposed to be evoked inside the viewer, that actually helps you not really think about the land, that makes you think of other things. Could you talk a little bit about this painting here?
Yeah, this painting is part of the Hymn for the Mother, and it references the natural world, but I've painted it in black and white because once again, I feel like the color is leaving, it's escaping us. And I think the painting lends itself to a little bit more fragility than if it were in color. And I think it's really easy for us in this time period that we're living to start to look at nature as being kind of a sensational thing and to see ourselves very separate from it, to see it almost as a form of entertainment. So, yeah, that's all kind of tied up in that exhibition and in that concept.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I really appreciate is that you move very swiftly from representational painting to full abstract painting. Mm-hmm. And both of them seem to be united by the way that they kind of provoke this contemplation and meditative quality. There's something about this painting that seems haunting, partly because it lacks the color and dynamism. There's a kind of quietude, but that darkness that's brought in is really solemn. And I think, when thinking about, the heaviness of some of these topics you're talking about and that have happened on the land and our relationship to that and our responsibility, there is a, necessity to kind of quiet ourselves before that and think about that.
Right. I mean, we should be really quite, in awe of where we live. I mean, this planet. Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, and it's like we're totally trashing it. And then we get so busy with our lives, and our electronics that we just don't slow down to really appreciate those moments. I mean, this afternoon I got to walk down to the lake, and I grew up on Lake Huron, and oh my gosh, I was like, I just wanted to drink it, I knew I shouldn't, and I also wanted just to jump in it, and it's like, it's just a marvelous, I mean, it's like, wow, it's just incredible what that lake is. And, here's this beautiful city built on the lake, and yeah, you guys know what I'm saying, right?
Well, as someone who lives in the city, I mean, I can't help but, romanticize a little bit about what it must be like to live in Montana. I mean, to be able to have a studio that looks out, out into this landscape, and that your daily life
is in it.
Is right there in it. And maybe if you could tell me, like, what is a day in the life?
In my life?
Yeah, what is that like?
Day
and what
in the life of Anne Appleby.
What does it entail? You wake up and the birds are singing.
Yeah, in the winter they're not singing, they all leave because it gets really cold like it does here. Well, okay, let's say this time of year. Okay, I usually get up, I have a cup of coffee, I do a little stretching and a little yoga. I usually meditate for an hour, and then I like to go for a walk. And we have a picture of where I like to walk. And
And we'll come back to that, but this is,
yeah. And so the picture of the pond that we just saw, in the middle with your laser, do you want to do those bushes that are in the middle? Yeah, right behind those is where that pond is. So I get a lot of inspiration by taking my walks, and then I usually come back, eat breakfast, and then I go in the studio usually for more than I should, like 8 hours or so, and that's pretty much my day.
sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, for others who don't have a lifestyle like that, it feels almost indulgent and like, oh, this
I
is
know,
perfect or
it's like the
ideal.
artist's life, right?
It is.
It's so easy being an artist.
It's so romantic, but it's also very hard.
Yeah, a lot of hard work.
Well, to go back a little bit is just, I want to look at this sculpture because, thinking about the land and thinking about, climate change and the ways that we're responsible for that, I think about, this is a sculpture that was in Anne's exhibition.
Him for the mother, yeah.
Him for the mother that you made. And I think it really captures kind of an attitude or spirit that we need, or a posture, I'll say, of how we should be responding. But could you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, when I first conceived of the sculpture, I didn't know, my first impulse was to make her have her hands raised, like, ah, like, help, we're in frustration and in fear and, and just being super freaked out like many of us are. And then I settled on this, and it's more it's more reverence and more maybe a little bit, a little sad, but it's also that, that incredible thing that we've been gifted with as human beings to really have faith, not to negate and to, put blinders on about what's happening, but to actually really, calm ourselves down and to be able to, take care of each other, with that same respect. Take care of the Mother Earth and take care of each other. We're all her children, so that's what we need to do. And we need to come from that kind of a place in order to do it in a good and loving way, kind way.
I mean, that's really beautifully said. I think about this piece and thinking about the exhibition, how this figure is surrounded by all the paintings, almost as if they are in the center of a landscape like this. And I think of how there is, I like the word reverence that you said. There's a reverence, and then there's also this kind of reciprocity of taking care of each other.
Right.
That I find present.
Yeah, we're all her children.
Yeah.
We're all here together.
And we want to make it last.
Yeah, we want to take care of each other too.
Exactly. Which leads us to these works. These are some of my favorite. These greens. The screen, doesn't do them justice, but I think about how that saturation of color, and I think about how whether you're painting the actual representation of a tree or the grass, or these, they're almost one and the same, that the way that you're looking and perceiving. And I wonder about, source material, like when you are, referencing landscape like this, are you taking photographs and bringing those back to your studio?
No, they're usually just from being out in nature and feeling, it's like, I think in order for a painting to be really good, you should be able to smell it and taste it and touch it and hear it and visualize and see the visual thing. So when I'm out in the woods, I really, really, really like to come in the studio and try to paint that, like the experience I had that afternoon, And then the hard part about doing it, because it takes, 30 layers of paint, it probably takes like 3 or 4 months to make a painting like this, is holding that memory or that experience or the sensation of it in my mind, in my body, so that I can not, it would be really easy for it to run away. So it's kind of a really concentrated practice.
Well, it makes me think of, the fact that you're holding it is so intentional, not just for the painting, but this kind of acknowledgement of the gratitude, of the beauty,
Of love.
of love, of all these things that are being held in your relationship that I think,
Sacred.
I feel like it translates into the work, that the temporal somehow is translating a lot of that sacred relationship in the work. And I'm curious to think about why the seriality.
Of these three together?
And you also, in other ones, did with the grid.
Right. I don't have any, I didn't bring any examples of those, but these, each panel is 72 inches by, I believe, either 32 or 34 inches. So they remind me of a doorway or a portal or something that a human being can walk through. And so when I put three of these together, to me, it's like my weird little artist, whatever you would call it, my little narrative is like walking through a landscape. It's like the human walking through a forest.
And that's something that you do weekly. I could say every day, but it's a constant kind of daily ritual you're often doing. You're often noticing, you're often taking that in. And then to think about going back to the studio, and then you're still there. Because the studio is all about that as well.
Right, exactly, yeah.
It feels like a very, just a rich exchange, a long dialogue that is ongoing.
Yes.
And in that way, I feel like it transcends other kinds of studio practices that maybe where one is often books, you're often living a living experience. And I find that unique. It's very different from how I work. But it feels like there's something really attractive about it. And it feels, very humble at the same time. So, very fascinating. And these are some of the trees.
Yeah, I took this one on a walk this spring. It's a chokecherry tree. Do you guys have chokecherries here? Yeah, I love them. And so you can see the blossoms in the image here. And very recently, I've gotten really, I've always been, but I feel like I'm finally bold enough to start trying to paint this. Just that kind of ephemeral quality of plants and just kind of like how they catch light and water and they can get all glittery and then they change, like this is in the spring. Pretty soon, right now it's a whole different color. And yeah, so that's what that's about.
One of the questions I've been thinking about that I wanted to ask you is that I'm curious about your influences over the course of your lifetime and influences in your practice starting off from early, grad school, and then thinking about have those changed and shifted and who the influences or what are the influences now?
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania, so when I went to the University of Montana, if someone would have asked me, and this is really important, who, was my favorite artist, I would have said Andrew Wyeth. Because if you think about his work, think of Christina's World, for example. There is the figure, this lone figure in this huge, vast space. So it kind of talks about the same thing that I'm talking about right now.
I feel like you're the figure, though, in that fast
Or you
space.
are, when you look at the painting, right?
Sure,
Yeah, but it's kind of very similar. So, and then, of course, when I went to the University of Montana and people would ask me that question, they would say, oh, you're kidding me, Andrew Wyeth? You're supposed to say Mark Rothko or somebody like that. And no, but sincerely, that's that's how I felt, you know? And also, when I was a kid, I would go out into the landscape quite a bit. I really haven't changed that much, you know, by myself often. So yes, Andrew Wyeth was really big, and then Chuck Close,
That's a good one.
right? And in undergraduate school, Chuck Close, hence the black and white.
And then
And the really fine, you know, the really fine rendering, right? And then Nicholas de Stael. Does anybody know who Nicholas de Stael is?
I'm not familiar.
Russian? Was he Russian? French? Yeah, French. In the mid 20th century, 21st century, and that's where I really got enamored with layering, because he would just stack color on top of color, and he would make these. They were figurative, but they looked really abstract. And then those paintings that you think of in the 60s that everyone had hanging in their living rooms, of these kind of like boats that were like sort of abstracted but really colorful. People kind of stole from him, but he was a really fine painter. So yeah, and he's still there. And then of course there's Granddaddy Monet. And later Agnes Martin, you know, somewhat, yeah. And
That's a good one I can see.
yeah.
Yeah, have you found that you've been compared to color field painters?
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Well, it's like, what do you call it? It's color field, reductive abstraction. I recently watched a documentary on Agnes Martin, and she was invited to show, was it Parsons Gallery? And it was with all the quote minimalist painter, and she was, you know, being compared to them because her paintings were kind of reductive, but you know, they didn't really have names for those paintings. They were trying to be as objective as they could in the images that they were making, and then she would, you know, name it stone. So she always had a reference to nature. And she always would insist that she was an abstract expressionist. She did not really like the term being called a minimalist. And, you know, I have to agree with her.
Yeah, I can definitely see maybe the connections between the two of you in your practices. And I'm thinking like your grid paintings come to mind in the way that you've laid out the grid in multiple panels versus maybe one, where the paintings become the grid. But I think it's interesting to just think about those early influences and to see what remains over time and what shifts and what changes and how you change as an artist and how the influences kind of shift and move. I think a lot about the people in our lives too that also influence our practice. The relationships that come through art, that come through mentorship, that come through meeting another artist. Do you have some people in the past that you feel really left a mark?
Oh, yeah.
That continues to show up?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'll start back in grade school. No, in junior high.
Oh, that's good.
I'm like you. I used to be an athlete when I was young, and so I played on the field hockey team. And the coach happened to be my art teacher, Mr. Ribick.
Cool.
Yeah. And I was not very good at algebra.
Same. Well, the track coach was the algebra coach, and I was like, not
okay.
very good at algebra.
This was more symbiotic. So anyway, I would really get in trouble with algebra. And so he always made sure that I had something I had to do in the art room to kind of save me time and time again. And he really, really mentored me that way. really kind of focused me into art. And I am forever grateful to him. And then my parents were really great too, because they kind of recognized that I liked art a lot. I got really engaged in it. And so they made sure I had piano lessons and painting lessons when I was really young.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful to them for that. And then when I was, I don't know, about 28, I was working on, I got invited to work on the women's mural in Helena, Montana, which is the capital. And I was working on that, and it was like big. It was like 104 feet on the side of a building, and it was the history of women in Montana. And then I was like, hey, where are the Indian women? You know, there are no Indian women in this mural. So then I didn't know people at the Helena Indian Alliance, but I started working with them. And so we ended up being able to add, like, the last third of it is, you know, the indigenous women of Montana. And then I started having affiliation with Eddie Barbeau, who was I think he was the president of the board of the Helena Indian Alliance. And then he kind of like tapped me on the shoulder and said, oh, well, you could come and help me paint, you know. And so that's how I started my mentorship, him mentoring me, and my apprenticeship with him, which lasted, like 13 years. He was, you know, he died when he was 86. So that's what ended it. But yeah, I learned a lot from him.
Yeah, that's remarkable, and it's really special. I mean, do you sense that sometimes that he's in the studio still, and you're thinking consistently about things he has taught you, talked to you about?
Yeah, I can hear his voice.
Yeah, I wonder about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, people that have that kind of impact, their impression kind of shows up in the decisions, in the work, in the way you think about it, that kind of ongoing narrative that you have in your mind as you're working through things, and even when you get frustrated on things.
Yeah, there's that, but there's also like my behavior too. Like, I feel like if I'm about to misbehave, it's like, you better not do that.
So it saves
so
you.
There's this kind of moral thing too, you know?
Yeah, that's really good. We should all be mindful.
Yes.
This work here, I want to pause us for a second and to look at this, because one of the things that I had mentioned earlier about when you're working representationally, and then also, you're moving to these purely abstract paintings. This one seems like it could immediately kind of dissolve into complete abstraction, or maybe go back to where it was, maybe it started there, like whether that's dissolved into it or it started from that, and this kind of came out of that. It has that feeling. I don't know if, the beginning or the end of it, but could you talk a little bit about this painting specifically?
Yeah, this painting's, this is very recent. It's only been finished maybe like, 6 weeks. And this painting, I actually painted like a monochrome, color field, whatever you want to call it, underneath it, and then projected the image on top of it. So it's kind of like kind of like a culmination of stuff I've been doing, and bringing it, finally making it cohesive and making it into one thing. And I'm really excited about it. I'm really, it's, once again, I'm really interested in the fragility and also like the illusion of the world, like the shimmery world, like when you look at water and it has those sparklies on it, or sparklies on top of snow, or a reflection in rain, it's like, and it distorts what we call, quote, reality. Yeah, I'm really interested in that kind of a quality.
There's this alluring perception, because I think of that glitter on that first fallen snow. Mm-hmm. There's nothing like it. After that goes away, it's gone, but that glitter on there is something that really plays with the perception of what that substance is.
Yeah.
And like,
And
if
it's light, you
It's
know?
light on top of that snow
Yeah.
that's like reflected back and bounces off. And
Yeah.
it's kind of magical.
And yeah, and light makes color.
It does. I'm going to move us on. This is a good image just to give, the audience an idea of the sense of scale. And, I think about, what does it do to like, being in the studio, in the studio, there's a lot of visual noise, potentially. You might have a very messy studio. Even if it's clean, there's just a lot of other things in there. And a lot of times, as an artist, you're painting and maybe working on more than one. But finally exhibiting and getting the work out is this kind of distilled space for the work to behave a little bit differently in. What is that experience like for you?
And many times it's like seeing it for the first time, I mean, you can see it in the studio, but when it leaves the studio and it goes out, it's on its own in the world, it's like oh no, I should fix that, you can't do that anymore. And so
No, you can't.
It's pretty final. And it's kind of like, oh wow, it really reveals itself in a different way.
I mean, this space, the ceiling is wonderful. It's like high and vaulted. And I mean, I think of, each one of those as like a different note, a different thing out in the landscape potentially, the different ways that one would notice things in the landscape, like the bark, like really staring at the bark and noticing the bark and how the branches move out from the bark. And then you're noticing where the new life is going to start to grow out of.
Exactly. And this actually is a poplar tree. It was commissioned by Dr. Ponza and his wife Rosa, and that's their space in Italy. And what grows along the River Po are poplar trees. So that's why I chose that tree.
I mean, I feel like it.
And each one of
translates
those panels
really
is
well.
6 feet by 9 feet. They're whoppers.
They are. They're gigantic. I mean, I feel like there is, when you were saying about all the senses get activated, I feel like there's a lot of sound that happens here, and it's completely tied to the landscape with that.
Yeah.
I think we're almost at time. I want to ask you one last question, and then we're going to open it up for those of you who have questions. But I've been thinking a lot about this idea of legacy. I feel that we're in a moment, we're in an age where all of our daily lives and moments and movements get captured. Everybody's taking, whether it's a selfie, whether it's a photograph just to send to a friend, whether it's Instagram, social media. And I feel that like you out in Montana and your practice, you're operating on a very different temporal aspect. But I'm thinking about like, what is legacy, like creating a legacy or having a legacy, being remembered? How do you think about those things?
Ooh, wow, that's a deep question. How do I think about it? Well, first of all, like my dad used to say, my dad was a musician, and he'd always say, oh yeah, there's the carrot. It's like making the painting that you've always wanted to make. So there's always that kind of pulls you along. But also I think, once again, it's like my morality. I just want to try to really be a kind person. And I think it's really hard for a society to determine what great art is while we're living in it. So, and it's really not up to me, So it's like I don't really want to be on the cover of Art Forum or anything, or, I just want to make the work.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for this conversation. Those are good last words. And you still might end up on the cover.
Maybe. I don't
Still might end up on that cover. But if any of you have questions, we would love to have some questions. There's some microphones, I think, floating around on either side, so please don't be shy and ask the questions you desire.
So I just wanted to ask you about from the very first two panels
Oh, well, it goes back to painter's tricks, It's just complementary colors going back and forth. Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say, too, that when I paint, I only use the primary colors and white. So if I need to make blacks, I might pull in a little bit of burnt umber for that. But I mix everything, I mix all my blacks, all my greens, everything.
Only primary. I had no idea. That is some wizardry. All right.
Hi, good evening. I don't think you mentioned this, but do you work on multiple canvases at one time?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And do you have studio assistants? like
Yes, I do.
Chuck Close?
I have one studio assistant who I've been working with for the last 4 years. And prior to that, I didn't have one. So it's really kind of great. And it becomes a little bit more collaborative, which I'm really enjoying. And I might say, too, that I went for him for the mother. I made a video, and I collaborated with a documentary filmmaker on that, and that was really fun. So I'm kind of, beginning to open myself up to collaborating a little bit more.
And just lastly, at the painting that Caroline you had shown recently, there was a little cutout at the top. I was
Yeah,
wondering
the
if you could talk
composition
about that
with
a little bit, please. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's the sky.
Let's see. Right there.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
hillside, and that's the sky at the very top.
Yeah, you talk about working on multiple canvases at the same time.
Yes.
And the difficulty of with the numerous layers, keeping the image in your head. But it must be even more difficult when you're working on numerous paintings.
It is, but I can do it, I mean, it's like, yeah, back to the legacy thing, I think like the coolest thing is being given a vision as a painter. Like him for the mother, there were other components to that I didn't show you, but it was like the vision of those components of the entire exhibition just came to me. It was like I could see them, but they just weren't manifest in the world. So it was like I needed to put all the components together. And then as I do that, sometimes the process of doing that will tweak or alter the finished product a little bit, but usually not too much. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, I'm just good at that.
Hi, thank you for being here and sharing your work with us.
Thank you for having me here.
You mentioned the weird feelings that come with taking your work at a different context out of your studio to a gallery. I was wondering if you had an intention for that different context for the viewer, if they are what you want them to feel. I just know for us or for me that it really felt like a gift to be with nature and think about nature for a little bit. And when I haven't for a while, if that's something you're thinking about.
Yeah, I really like to, my preferred way of working is to do more site-specific work. So to know that I'm going to make a group of paintings, which a group of them to me, even though it's not like a narrative, like a film or a cartoon or a novel, but visually a narrative, and then placing them in that context so that they work with that context. Is that what you were asking?
Or about the person who is in LA in a gallery who hasn't seen green in a while.
Oh, I see, yeah, yeah. I have had people tell me that they go into like this happened to me quite a bit, and when I lived in San Francisco, they would go into a gallery or see an exhibition, and they'd walk out onto the street, and they would be like, boing. It was like all of a sudden they noticed the color of foliage and the bark and stuff like that. And it changed their perception. I don't know how long that lasts, but when people tell me that, it makes me feel good.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, first of all, thank you. This was a really great conversation. And also, as a girl from Pennsylvania who played field hockey in high school, who was infatuated with Andrew Wyeth, and just grew up in probably a similar landscape, I have a similar infatuation with trees and light, and coming here and attending SAIC was one of the first times that I was really introduced to thinking about Indigenous people, and specifically considering the fact that my appreciation of nature is the perspective of a white person experiencing something that isn't truly mine. Not to say that
It
anybody,
is, because you're living here.
I guess I'm just saying I have experienced feelings of guilt in association to that, and I wondered if that's anything that you've had to work through as a part of your process at all, especially with like engagement with that community in your home.
No, not really. It was just, wow, what can I learn? I mean, we all come from Mother Earth, and no matter what our race is, no matter what our religion is, all of our blood is red, and we're all connected in humanity. And the one thing for sure is that our blood is red, and we're living here. So, we need to respect each other and to honor each other and to be kind to each other and learn from each other. I mean, that's why we're here.
Hi, Anne. Over here.
Where?
Right over
It's
here.
really hard to tell. It's like all of a sudden sound
It's
comes
okay.
from somewhere. Hi.
Hi, Anne. I just loved hearing the intentional mornings that you have and the time that you take to kind of take care of your own wellness. Would you say that there's an intentionality between the way that you maintain your own wellness to then make something well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't, if I have a really busy mind, like if I read the New York Times and then, go on Facebook and then, but I couldn't paint, I really couldn't. It'd be too. So it's intentional that I just kind of slow myself down.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where are you?
Over here.
Oh, hi.
Yes. From my observation, it seems like you're taking a lot of your experiences that are outside, organic, and then putting them on the canvas. I was wondering if you sort of see any potential in your future for taking your art and putting it back into the places that you've sort of abstracted it from, creating art that could exist in nature alongside being in sort of conversation. Is that something you've seen your artwork moving into, or?
No,
not?
not really. When I was in graduate school, I'd read a book by Robert Irwin. What is it? No, seeing is not. Oh, seeing is believing. Or forgetting. Yes, exactly. And it's basically about him trying to make a painting and then putting it in a gallery, and then it's like a white cube that is so far away from nature. And then I did live in a teepee for a while, and it was kind of like, oh, I can't hang any paintings on the walls, because they're like that. And then, I really did wrestle with those ideas around, the two-dimensional flat, canvas. And I just kind of came up with this idea of working with nature and architecture. So I don't know if you want to go back to that one. The way that I hang the canvases is very intentional, because the little space between that painting on the wall is the actual architecture of the room. But it's also a part of the painting, because it would be very different if I were to space those paintings out a foot from each other. It would read totally differently. So that is part of kind of my solution to that.
Oh, yes.
In the beginning of your talk, you spoke about caring about other people and the world. Can you just expound on that a little bit more?
I don't understand what you want me to say.
Well, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but I thought it was, so wise. And I think it probably comes out of your painting and your meditation practice. It was something, I'm thinking about the horrible world that we live in.
Yeah, it's pretty bad right now.
I want to know, what is your key to understanding that, or to being able to live in this
chaos and fear, and the more fearful we are, then the more we're going to mistreat each other, basically, is what I think. I think we really, really need to, try to be peaceful within ourselves, and then bring that into whatever we're doing. And I know it's much easier for me living by myself in the mountains to do that than it is for you guys who are living in urban centers, and having to put up with all the craziness of that. But, we can make choices on how to kind of try to really be peaceful and maintain our peace, every second. And I think that's what we need to do right now, because if we don't have it inside, it's not going to be outside. It's, it's up to us to foster that in ourselves, and then foster it through kindness with others, as we engage with others.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Caroline. What an incredible evening.
Thank you.